So we did the add and subtract, now we got to multiply and divide. Real numbers. But in the end, I mean, I think the challenge and my goal is that fractions are the thing we got to get good at. Okay. So that is good. You know, the main thing we got to keep in mind when we're multiplying, because I mean we're already doing this, is just this is about the signs of the products. Remember, we already learned product means the result of multiplication, right? What these two things are saying here is if you're multiplying a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative, you get a positive, right? If they have the same sign, when you multiply them, you get positive. It's when you've got one positive and one negative that the answer is negative. And they try to show that with a number line. If we understand on a number line that -3 means to the left, right, that would get us to here. If I do that again, right, then it's just taking me more into negative territory. This is literally 2 times -3. And where did I end up? -6, right? It doesn't turn you around to make it positive. So the main point of these right here is saying that positive times a positive equals a positive. Negative times a negative is a positive. Right? A positive times a negative is a negative. And a negative times a positive is a negative. So if you square a number, will it be positive or negative? Positive. Well, what if you square a negative number? Will it be positive or negative? Why? Because negative times negative is positive, right? So when you square, it's always positive. And you know what these are telling us is that in the end, you're just going to do the multiplication. If for the sign of one of them was negative, then put a negative on the answer. So here they've worked out, right, the 12 times -8, since it's a positive times a negative, should be a negative. Now the 8 times 12 part, you know, that's in our multiplication tables we've been practicing. That should be 96. So -96. Right, 24 times 0.5. Okay, how do you multiply a decimal? Right, you do multiplication, right, without regard to the decimals. 5 times 4 is 20. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 2 is 12, right? And that's a 0, so there's nothing to do. And since there was one decimal place to the right of the decimal point, just one, you add them up, however many there are for all those numbers, and you go that far over, right? That goes over here. It doesn't just necessarily line up. I mean, what if this was 2.4 times 0.5? Right? I would do the same math. I would get 1, 2, 0. But then how many decimal points would I count over? 2, because it's 1 here and 1 here, then it would go here. But you count up how many to the right you are for all of them. Okay, and this was a positive times a positive, so it was a positive. Okay, fractions. What is the operation that you do when you're multiplying fractions? We kind of already had to do that when we were doing these finding common denominators, right? What are the mechanics of multiplying fractions? Quiet, please. You know, really, what I said is no drinking anything but water in here, and I meant it, because now you guys are going to start spraying Coke on the floor or something. You understand? Water. Don't bring Coke. Don't bring coffee into here. What's on your desk? Okay. Okay. How do you multiply fractions? No. You didn't do that when we were just finding common denominators. Once you multiplied by that, how did you do it? You didn't go like this. you just go straight across, right? Multiplying fractions is straight across. Right? 3 times 1 is 3. 4 times 2 is 8, right? It's straight across. And then because it was a negative times a positive, it's a negative. And again, here's a square. Negative 3 squared is negative 3 times negative 3. Whenever you square a number, you get a positive. Okay, what are these products? Now, 15 is not in our multiplication tables, but can we figure out what is 6 times 15? Okay, it should be 90. It should be positive or negative. It's negative because of the minus. Now, if you need to, you could have done the 6 times 15, 6 times 5, 30, 6 times 1 is 6 plus 3, 90, and it's negative. The 12 times 0.2. Yeah, I mean, just think of it. It's going to be 12 times 2, which is 24, and then you're going to move over once. You know, 0.2 as a fraction is what? 1/5, right? So you should be expecting to get a number. It's like about 1/5 of 12. It's a little, you know, a smaller number. Okay, multiply this one. It's fractions. So how do we do the fractions? Say again? Yeah, it's hard to see. There is a negative in front, but just multiply straight across, right? 7 times 3, 10 times 5. So that'll be negative 21 over 50. Can that be simplified? Can that be simplified? I mean, are there any common factors? I mean, what are the factors of 21? 7 and 3. You know, you don't count the 1. I mean, that never helps. Or the 21. Well, 21 could help. But the 3 and 7, 50 is not divisible by either one. How can you tell if a number is divisible by 3? Like if I'm looking at a big number like 7, 4, 8, 6, how do you know if that's divisible by 3 besides putting it in the calculator and dividing by 3? Say again? No. You add them up, right? Add up these numbers. 7 plus 4 is 11, plus 8 is 19, plus 6 is 25. Is 25 divisible by 3? No, so this is not either. If you add up the digits and that's divisible by 3, then the number is divisible by 3. 50 is not 5 plus 0. That's not divisible by 3. So this is good. And then negative 4 squared would be 8. Come on. Positive 16. So again, most of what we're doing here, one is about the signs, right? Get the sign of the product correct. And the thing especially is know how to multiply fractions straight across. And if you have to simplify, simplify. Now, dividing fractions or dividing numbers, it's pretty much the same. You know, if you're dividing numbers that have the same sign, positive divided by a positive is a positive. Negative divided by a negative is a positive. You know, if one of them is negative, then the answer is negative. The quotient, right? The result of the division is negative. The ones that we make a lot of mistakes with are when we're doing things with 0. So remember that if you divide by, if you have a fraction and the numerator is 0, what does it equal? What is 0 over 8? It's 0. Think of it like this. If you have a pizza and you divide it into 8 equal parts, and I give you 0 of those parts, how much pizza do you have? Nothing. You don't have anything. So when you see something like this, you don't leave it. You make it a 0. It equals 0. Simplify it. Right? And what about if it was the reverse? Undefined. You cannot divide by 0. Right? That has got to be undefined. It's not 0, undefined. And it's not 8, it is just undefined. You can't do that. I mean, when you divide things, you're trying to divide them into equal parts, right? How many equal parts of that size would you get? Well, if I divided in 8 into a bunch of parts that each one of them had no size, how many would it take to fill up the 8? If each one of those parts is nothing. I mean, you can't do it. I mean, you can't even conceive of it. That's why it's undefined. It doesn't make sense to have a part which has no area, no size. Okay, now when you divide fractions, remember dividing fractions, to divide by a fraction is to multiply by the reciprocal. Right? You turn it into a multiplication problem. Right? A over B divided by C over D is A over B times, and then you take this fraction, not the first fraction, just take this one and flip it. And then multiply straight across. Like 4/3 divided by 8/9 is 4/3 times 9 over 8. And then that's something you can just go straight across. 36 over 24. Now, could you simplify that? What's the greatest common factor between? That is a common factor, but it's not 12, right? 12 goes into both 24 and 36. How many times does it go into 36? Right? Multiplication table times. How many times does 12 go into 24? 2. So that is 3 halves. So how should I do this one? 3/4, turn it into a multiplication problem. What will it be? 3/4 times negative 2/5. That's how you do division of fractions. That's how it works. Dividing by a fraction is like multiplying by the flip, the reciprocal. So I'm just taking that and I'm flipping it. Now I know how to do multiplication straight across. Okay. Yes. All right, that's how you do a division. So now, 3 times 2, 6, 4 times 5, 20. It's a plus times a minus, which means minus, right? And can that be simplified? What's the common factor between 6 and 20? 2, right? So you can say, yeah, that will be, 6 goes, divided by 2 is 3, 20 divided by 2 is 10. Negative 3 tenths. All right, so dividing by a fraction is multiplying by the reciprocal. Now, where we've seen this before, where it usually trips us up, is if we have something like this in algebra, where it's you're trying to solve for y, and y's got a fraction in front of it. And you're not wrong to say, well, I'm going to divide both sides by 2/3, right? That's what you usually do to get rid of a number which is in front. But when you're dividing by 2/3, you're actually doing what? Multiplying by the reciprocal. Now, what would we rather be doing on this side? Dividing by 2/3 or multiplying times 3 halves? Right? That's easier than showing it as a divide by a fraction. We don't really know what we're going to do with that. So we tend to either not get this part right at all, like what am I supposed to do? Just stop. Or instead you get mixed up by trying to divide by 2/3 and then not doing that correctly. Now, the point of this class is not to be doing algebra, but not yet. But we'll get to this in the next chapter, I think. So then you have to distribute, right? These cancel, right? 3 halves times 2/3. What property is that? What does 3 halves times 2/3 equal? 1, right? And what property was that? Not identity, inverse, right? What do you multiply times a fraction to get the identity element? 1, the reciprocal. And so that just turns into 1y, which is y. And then on this side, I have to do distributive, and 2 goes into 8 4 times. So that's y equals 12x plus 3 halves. But I mean, that's where it comes into play. When we're solving equations, if you have a case to divide by a fraction. Instead, you're going to multiply by the reciprocal. And that's it. And I'm going to give you a worksheet to work on. It would be the homework. And that's all we'll do. Next class, the quiz will be over the order of operations, evaluating expressions, which means plug in, and the adding and subtracting of real numbers, including fractions. Okay. Usually my quizzes are not long. They're usually projected up here. Well, first of all, you go back to our first homework, the pages 3 and 7, and they have that in there. But evaluate an expression would be like x squared plus 2y, x equals negative 2y equals 3. So if I say evaluate, what does that mean? Evaluate means plug in the negative 2 here, plug in the 3 here, and then see what it equals. Come on. Right, that's what we mean by evaluate. Right? Any questions?